Hey everybody, and welcome to the plotting shed. Come on in and get yourself a cup of tea. I've got my cup of tea. You got your cup of tea, Isabel?
No, I've got my water bottle though.
Okay. Well, each of us are different. So we thought today we would open it up a little bit and talk more about what it is that we do, so that you can get to know us a little better as writers, editors, and coaches.
Yeah,
Hi.
Rach and I are very different as writers. And so we really cover the full spectrum of what it means to be a writer, and what you write, how you write. Um, and so yeah, we'll jump in. We've got some questions, and you can get to know us.
Yeah, and if you have some questions that we haven't answered, or you want to join in and answer some of those questions, feel free to add them in the comments. And then obviously subscribe and like.
Awesome. So we'll start with what we actually write. So Rachel, what do you write?
So I write fantasy, I would say, but maybe not like the fantasy that you're thinking of when I say fantasy. People think of dragons, they think of epic fantasy, not necessarily epic fantasy, although I would love to write epic fantasy. I'm just not quite there yet in terms of time, the time that it takes. Um, but I write fantasy, magical realism, with feminist themes, usually a little bit of witchcraft, and also some quite dark, serious themes as well.
Hmm.
However, I often use quite a jovial voice and style, albeit not in my upcoming book, Witchborn, which is dark and is not funny. How about you? What do you write?
I write primarily crime and thriller, and mystery. I love mystery. I always say that in my books you can find murder, mystery, and mayhem. Um,
Nice.
because I love a whodunit. It's just so satisfying. And I used to write fantasy, but in the last couple of years I really shifted into the crime space, and recently wrote my first kind of proper locked room thriller, which was very exciting.
Nice. What do you think your favorite murder mystery is?
It's gotta be Murder on the Orient Express, and
Nice.
I feel like it's a classic. Maybe it's a cop out, but I feel like it's a classic for a reason because it's just fun and it's just the epitome of the locked room. And yeah, love it. You can't go wrong with Agatha Christie.
Have you seen the movie?
I have. I was not a fan. If I'm No, it wasn't for me. I will always be a David Suchet as Poirot.
Oh, and I actually sat behind him once in a restaurant in Bath.
Oh my God, did
It
you
was
say
very
him?
exciting. He didn't have the moustache, which was
That's weird.
gutting, but it was him. It was him.
I know, I find it really strange
Uh,
when I hear him with his English accent.
yeah, right. It's strange, isn't it? Lovely. So, when you are writing a story, what comes to you first? Is it the character or is it the plot? How does it work in your mind?
It's usually the inciting incident or kind of like the overarching plot, I
Mm.
guess. Like overarching conflict, I suppose. So in my current lockdown thriller, the first idea that came to me was about this wealthy author who dies and makes their inheritance available to the public. And then the rest of the story I just sort of filled in from that
Yeah,
idea. Yeah.
cool.
What about you?
It's pretty much always character.
Interesting.
Characters come to me quite strongly, and then they tell me who they are. And the plot is very much like developed around them and whatever their pressure point is. Um, how can I make them suffer? Yeah, and why are they struggling?
Interesting. Because, for me, it's always sort of how do they fit around the plot, and what do they need to have for the plot to work?
Oh,
Rather,
interesting. Okay, yeah,
yeah.
totally opposite me. And this is like why we say we're super different because we are.
Mm,
Like in our writing lives, we just come at things from a different perspective, don't we?
yeah. Even
which
just
is,
down to when we're creative, because you're a morning writer, I'm
yes,
definitely an evening writer.
yeah. I could never do anything in the evening. Like just sit down is what I can do in the evening. Um, but yeah, I really like the idea of the sacred floor,
Mm,
which is very much kind of what is the belief of this character and how are we testing it?
mm,
Um, so yeah, that's kind of what I like to kind of plot around.
mm.
So yeah.
I feel like maybe because I love multiple point of view. I love it. And maybe because there's so many characters, sometimes it's hard one of them to come to you first. But in my new story idea, which is like a more of a mystery than a thriller, the character was definitely much stronger because it was just one person's perspective and one person's story. So yeah, I guess if character central, that makes sense they come first.
See, I like a main character. I'm not such a one for changing kind of point of view in that way. In The Birth of Ida, Ida's definitely my main character, but point of view, I do kind of use other point of views that are useful to me, but it's very much told from like non-omniscient narrator's point of view, which helps with that.
Mm. So then how do you kind of expand on your ideas? And are you a plotter or do you pants your stories, something in between?
Um, I feel like I used to be a plotter and now I'm something in between.
Hmm.
So I love to have an idea of where it's going, but I have learned that you can plot something to like the nth degree and it kind of doesn't matter. Um, if your character is going to go to a place and your character is well realized enough and you know them enough, they're not necessarily always going to do what you intended them to do. And there's like a joy in following a character and discovering about their world as they want you to learn about it, as opposed to um, trying to force them into a plot that isn't necessarily right for them. So, like a good example of that would be my novel Witchborn started off as an entirely different thing, and I still think the original idea for that was great. And I very much like my main character was very much going to do what I had decided, but she just like her name is Agnes. It was like she was just like, that's actually not like the biggest issue in my life right now. Like the biggest issue is this. And that's ultimately what the novel became about. And I couldn't have predicted that. And I plotted all of that already. And like none of the plot happened. But the main character stayed the same. She just told me more about who she was and what she was dealing with. And I make it sound like she's alive. She is alive in my head. So how about you? Are you a plotter, a pantser?
Definitely pantser. Um, I tried plotting and I hated it. It just took all the fun out of it, and I felt like the story had already been told, and I didn't need to write it then because it'd been plotted.
Mm.
Um, and pantsing is very difficult when you write a thriller or a mystery because there's so much to
My
keep,
next question.
yeah, having to remember where people were or what their motives might be or all of that kind of stuff um, is very tricky. But interestingly, when I was writing, I call it Project Puzzle, this thriller, um, I changed who the murderer was halfway through because as I was writing, I just thought, actually, I don't want you to be the murderer. This person's going to be the murderer because they just make sense. They spoke to me. And even though the plot comes first, because I do so little plotting and so little planning, it means that there is that room then for the characters to develop and show themselves, like you were saying. And I love that. I love being
Mm.
surprised by your own
Oh
story.
God.
Yeah.
And you have to have, even if you're a plotter and like you plot everything, I do think you've got to allow yourself to have space
Mm,
um, to find things that you may not have known. Because sometimes the most bizarre and brilliant ideas come when you least expect it.
mm,
And you can kind of follow that path and go, oh my God, that's the reason for that. You know, it's almost like you foreshadow things sometimes that you didn't know you were foreshadowing,
mm.
but your
That's
brain will connect it.
Exactly. Like it's kind of bad to say, but when I started writing the thriller, I didn't know how it would end, and it really bothered me because I thought I feel like I can't start writing if I don't know what I'm working towards, if I don't know what I'm setting up at the end. But I thought, you know what, we're just gonna wing it. And it paid off because then when I realized that I needed to change who the murderer was, that opened up the ending, and I was like, oh, that's how it ends. Okay, great. Now I know what happens. And
Feeling. It's
yeah,
such a nice feeling when that.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like clicking, it's all coming together.
yeah. And George R. R. Martin calls it being an architect or a gardener.
Mm,
And I really like that because like to be a gardener is to plant a seed and watch it grow.
yeah.
And that is lovely. And I do think like where you feel that a plot once by the time you've plotted it, you feel kind of like, oh, okay, it's done. So what's the point? It makes me feel relief.
Mm.
So when I plot a story, there's a relief there that it's done. So now all I have to do is fill it in, which is the way I used to feel at school when I wrote an essay plan. Like I'd be like, oh, okay, like the essay's done, it's okay. And I still feel like that about academic writing as well. Just like there's a relief. I've just got to do almost like the easy bit now, which isn't the easy bit, but that's how it feels once I've done the plan.
So if you went back in time then, what advice would you give to younger self then about writing?
I would say I think to keep writing after querying. I had
Mm,
this weird stage where I had graduated from my PhD. And so what I had was this novel that had been written, like I'd been writing it and editing it over a 4 year period, that had been like peer reviewed by other doctors of creative writing and some very like well-respected people. I had successfully like argued its case in a viva. And my image of that was very much like, okay, this may be the best novel I'll ever write because it's been through so much rigorous testing. Um, and my next step was, okay, so if that's true, then this should be something that I publish. So I tried to find an agent, and listen, finding an agent is really hard. You and I both know that. For anyone watching who doesn't know, there's like the statistic is like between 1% and 2% of people who are trying to find agents get one. The statistics on getting published once you have an agent are slightly different. It's, I think, 40% of manuscripts don't get published once you have an agent, like can't be sold. And I know people personally who have gone for their author headshots and all this stuff and then haven't the manuscript hasn't been able to be sold and ultimately the manuscript has ended up doing nothing. Um, so I had this kind of mindset of it's this novel or it's nothing, right? If this novel doesn't get published, then what's the kind of the point? Because this is the most complete thing I'll ever have written.
mm,
Which now, literally 10 years later, I'm like, that's not the right way to think about that. But that was the way I was thinking about it. So when I found it hard to get an agent, I just had this massive like personal wobble, and stopped writing completely for like maybe a year, maybe a bit more. Um, which is like super sad
yeah.
for someone who had like just spent a lot of time and money because my PhD was not funded, it was self-funded, on this one thing that I'd always wanted to take that hit so hard. That makes me really sad. But at the time, 10 years ago was a super different time. And I think about this quite often. The job of writing coach didn't exist like it does now. That wasn't a thing. Um, there wasn't really anyone I could have hired to help me talk that through. Even if there was, like the working from home element that we understand now was different. So it wasn't the same space that we exist in now. Um, so yeah, it took me years to get my mojo back. And the next novel I wrote ended up being my debut novel. And I now look at my first novel in a totally different way. That novel has done its job. It got me a PhD in creative writing. And that's all I need that to do. And actually, it's such a different style from my current writing and from where I want to be and how I want to be viewed that I actually don't want it published anymore, which is kind of a different kind of stage to be in. And now I've written six novels, so I'm back in it. And the world is different now for me. I talk to writers all the time. Work with people all the time in this one thing that I've always wanted. So it's very different. But yeah, I would say to myself, if you are querying, and this would be my advice for anyone else, if you're querying, make sure you're still writing. Write your next thing. Because actually, what it does is it puts way less pressure on the thing that you're querying to be the one. It might not be the one. And people's first novels rarely are their debuts. So if you've written a novel, you want to query it, go for it, but keep writing at the same time. That was a really long answer. How about you?
So my advice, if I could go back in time and tell myself something, I would go back in time about 7 years ago and tell myself that it's okay if your book is similar to something else.
Okay, yeah.
Because I had such a hang up about my book needing to be totally original, completely different. It couldn't be like anything else. And that book was this epic fantasy, and someone said, "Oh, it's like Game of Thrones." And just like you, I was devastated and I didn't write for a year because, for one, mainly it was because their feedback was so harsh and so horrible that it just was maybe not feel great. Um, but the idea that my ideas weren't original enough really bothered me. And I used to get so in my own head when I was developing an idea of it can't be like anything else. And that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
And you need your stories to be kind of like something else because you need to be able to pitch them to an agent or a publisher. And if you're saying, I've got something no one's ever seen before, they're not going to know how to sell it, where to put it in the market, where it sits on a shelf. So knowing that your book has elements of other stories and concepts and similarities, but
Mm.
is in itself yours and it's unique because you wrote it,
Yeah.
that's all that really matters.
Mm,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I think it's really helpful to know what inspired that kind of story as well. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a novel. It can be like a film or like a game or something like that, that you can comp to as well. That's just as valuable, I think. But yeah, it's really tough though when you are learning about this stuff. Everybody's work has got to be derivative of something else, right? But this is like a huge question. Are there any original ideas left? I don't know. You know?
but I mean, like so many things we read, they're inspired by mythology or
Yes,
inspired by historical events or whatever. So even though they've got their own unique spin on them, it still comes from something.
absolutely.
You can still trace it back. And yeah, like when I look at what I used to write, oh my God, it was just basically fan fiction of like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings.
That's how I
And
started too. Lord of the
yeah,
Rings fan fiction. It was the best thing in the world.
oh
And like
man,
I still think about that with like nothing but joy. Like
yeah,
I used to be so excited to get home from school.
yeah,
I was just like really looking forward to getting home and writing Lord of the Rings fan fiction. And it was like in Tolkien's world.
yeah. See, I had my own world and characters, and it wasn't actually fan fiction, but it was basically the plot of that. And there was like the wizard and the whatever.
I
But when
love
I think
it.
about it, not a single part of me when I was 12 and writing that was bothered. There was no bit of me that was like, oh no, people are going to judge it because it's like Lord of the Rings. It's only when I got older and I was wanting to publish seriously that then all of that then started to bother me and I overthought everything. Whereas back then, God, it was so fun and free and just,
Yeah, it's just joyful. And that like that's kind of I've got like a book behind me, a notebook, that it's like I'm never going to publish. I'm never going to type up. It's handwritten. And it's like Skyrim fan fiction. And I will take that to a coffee shop and I will just like indulge. and I absolutely love it. And it's to get back to that joy. Like it doesn't matter. There's no pressure on this thing. No one's going to see it. Um, but it's joyful.
Mm.
Because writing's supposed to be fun, isn't
Yeah, otherwise, what's the point?
it? Like it's supposed to be allowed. Yeah,
So your first
interesting.
novel, was that your PhD novel, or was there one before that? Right.
I have like uh I would say like novellas
Hmm.
for that, not full novels.
Right.
Yeah. One of my novellas, I don't think it was well executed, but I think the idea is still really good.
Mm.
So I think about that sometimes. And I think, yeah, maybe one day. I still think the idea is cracking. I might play with it one day.
I think that like I did a post on my Instagram recently that was about all the books I've written.
Yeah, I
Um,
loved that.
Thank you. Yeah, so I wrote my first novel when I was 12, and then now I think it's I'm writing. I just finished the 28th book, and I think about some of those early books and think, oh, that would just it'd be so nice to take that idea and do it better than I did when I was 14. But those ideas are just I don't know, they come from such a different place, and I want to revisit it with everything I know now. And yeah,
Do you still have that work?
I don't think so, unfortunately. I think it's on an old computer
Yeah,
somewhere on a hard
I
drive that
don't
I'll
think
never
I
be
do.
able to access.
I don't think I've got mine either. And I think about that stuff and I think about things I've written and I just think, that's the different world we live in now. Everything goes like on the cloud, so you can access that stuff. But like, I would love to read my Lord of the Rings fan fiction now.
Yeah,
But I don't have that. Like, I don't even know where that is.
yeah. I don't trust the cloud, so I need to get better at backing things up. I need to be
We
better.
all do, don't we? Yeah. So if one of your books, let's say Project Puzzle, was going to be adapted into a film, who is your dream cast for the main characters? Because there's quite a lot of characters in it, isn't there? Like seven, is
Yeah.
that right?
6 points of view, but 10 main characters. Um, the thing is, I don't actually know what any of them look like because I don't really describe my characters, and I don't know. So one of the characters, Ari, um, she is Maori from New Zealand, so that's very important. Um, I would have a very specific, like she wears like very oversized clothes, and I know what she looks like because I think that's most similar to how I would dress. um, and then there's the oldest character who's a doctor, and he wears like tweed suits and very kind of refined gentleman. So I have elements of their characters, but I don't actually know in terms of actors or actresses who I would get. I don't know. I can't picture their faces very well.
Okay, I mean, well, okay, here's a slightly different one then. And if someone was making a film about you as an author, who would play you?
Oh my gosh. See, I could be really generous to myself here. Like someone obviously really attractive. um,
Anne Hathaway.
ooh, yeah, I wouldn't mind Anne Hathaway.
I
She's
think
a
you
bit
guys look
slim,
similar.
I think that's been a bit too kind to me. I don't know. I don't know who I would look like. Someone Australian. They'd have to have the Australian accent, although mine isn't that strong anymore. But
You
still,
still have the twang. You got the twang. Yeah.
good. Can't lose the twang. Um, I don't know. I feel like that's a question someone else should answer for me. Don't know if I
But I've
can.
answered it, and there you are, Anne Hathaway.
Thank you. What about you? Who's in your cast? Which book are you choosing?
Do you know what? I'll go with the Birth of Ida because I know exactly who Ida looks like,
Mm.
and it's Bruce Willis's daughter.
Oh, not what I was
Uh,
expecting. Okay.
so she shaved her head, and she looks just like she just looks just like Ida. Hang on a second. Let me find out her name because he has a few kids. She is it Tallulah? It is Tallulah. Tallulah Willis.
Okay, I'll have to look her up. Is she an actress? Tallulah Mills?
Don't know.
Well, she is now. and she's going to be cast in the best part.
I'm not sure. Model and designer. So, I might have to have a chat about whether or not that's something that Tallulah would be open to.
Yeah. So what what would you say? I mean, we've both written quite a few books, but what would you say is one of the most challenging scenes that you've had to write?
It's tricky, isn't it? So one of the scenes in The Birth of Ida is Ida basically like she's having to like survive in the wilderness and she kills a deer um, and remembers how her father used to kind of dissect them and like cook them and stuff. I haven't eaten meat in 23 years um, and like have real problems with textures and like food textures and all that kind of thing. Very sensitive eater. And I always have been. That scene for me was like I had to obviously research it because I've never done that. It was very hard for me to research and write. I did not enjoy it at all. When my sister read that book, she was like, "I was surprised to see that scene in it," and I was like, "Well, yeah, because you have to explain it somehow. You got to explain how this person is surviving." But it was horrible to write.
Yeah. And I guess she wouldn't have the luxury of just choosing to be vegetarian.
Right, exactly. Like, what are you going to do? Like, she was in essentially like a snowy landscape. You had to do something. Um, so yeah, that was tough. How about you?
Um, I can't remember, going back decades, but I know that in one of my most recent ones from a couple of years ago, I was writing a scene between two sisters, which was a topic very close to my heart. And it was all just very, very close to home, the conversations that they were having and the kind of truths being acknowledged and bonding and stuff. And I think I ended up sort of crying as I was writing it because it was just so cathartic. And it was just so, it felt so raw and so real to kind of
Mm.
put all of that onto a page. And yeah, say things that I felt were significant to me and to this character and something I thought a lot of other people could probably relate to. Um, so yeah, it was it wasn't challenging because it was necessarily difficult to write, but it was just challenging, I guess, trying to remain the author and be objective, I guess, as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, you know what they say, isn't it? Like tears in the writer, tears in the reader, surprise in the
Mm,
writer, surprise in the reader. So
yes.
it'd be interesting to read that scene back and see how you feel.
Yeah, it would. No one else is allowed to read that book, but
But a private book.
yes. Yeah.
Fair. Um, so what is your next book going to be about?
So
Do you know?
the next one is a small town mystery, uh, in which it's set in Scotland, and this woman had it's very hard I haven't actually had to explain this book out loud, and now I'm struggling. Uh, there was a whole incident with her father and her brother, and she ended up leaving. And then 7 years later, her brother messages her and says, "You need to come home." And she comes home, and he's missing. And so then it's sort of the investigation into him missing, but her also not wanting to involve the police because of the very dodgy things that she did 7 years ago before she left. Yeah,
Interesting.
that's not
Sounds
much.
intriguing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
What about you?
Well, at the moment I'm finishing Where the Crows Die, which is up there. I'd put pictures of like my books on the wall because they inspire me to continue. Even though Ties of Spring is now Witchborn, The Birth of Ida doesn't have that cover. The Deadworth Shame is not kind of in the world, but yeah, that's kind of a big inspiration for me. And the second space isn't even up there. But I would love to like after Where the Crows Die, would love to do um like an epic fantasy. I've got this mad idea um for a series, but it's 16 books. And if I average a book a year, which is what I do average, um, I'm going to be like, 56 by the time I finish it. Uh, and that freaks me out because there's going to be other ideas that I have
Yeah.
that I'm going to want to. So it's too big an idea, I think, but it would be fun to write one of them.
Mm. I mean,
Um,
it could be a project that kind of is as and when around other projects.
hmm, yeah, but I really like the idea. So I've just been playing with it in my head for a while, and I'm really keen to get into this like world of fantasy, slightly different from what I have been writing, which is more magical realism.
Mm.
Like fantastical elements in the real world is what I have been writing, but what I would like to step into is like epic fantasy. But we shall see, because ideas sometimes grab you and you don't know they're coming, and then before you know it, you're halfway through a novel.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that I have the commitment even to a duology. So 16 books is a feat.
I mean, it's too big. It's too big in the grand scheme of things. Anyway, we'll see. So, shall we end on quite a fun question?
Mhm.
How do you handle criticism?
uh, it depends. Um, I I am very open to feedback, and I it took a very long time before I ever got feedback because I was so embarrassed at the thought of someone reading the book. But like, 4 or 5 years ago, branched out, got feedback, and it's been revolutionary. So I'm very open to it as long as it's actually constructive and
Uh-huh.
as long as I know that they have read the work properly. And it's not like, how did this happen? And it's like, well, it's on the page. If you'd actually just read it properly, you'd see it was right there. I actually explained that.
You've
So
annoyed yourself already.
it really irritates me. So yeah, as long as it's constructive feedback, and it's clear with what it wants me to do, not just this could be better. Okay, and how?
Yes.
So yeah, it needs to be good feedback. It needs to
Uh,
be well, yeah.
yeah. And by good, you mean, yeah,
Yes,
constructive
good,
as
helpful,
opposed
not
to
good
positive.
like just singing my praises. Although that's also welcomed.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about you?
Also, like just to say, it's so common for writers to feel scared to share their work.
Mhm.
And like as both of us are editors, like something that you experience a lot when someone sends you their work is like a fear from them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it always helps to kind of set that and say everybody's nervous. But everything that we do as editors is to make the work stronger. And we neither of us will ever criticize work in a negative way or without a path forward as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's it. Like the whole
scared.
point of the feedback
Yeah.
is to provide direction and support and explanation so
Yeah.
that you know what you're supposed to be doing instead.
Yeah. And also like part of that is you're so welcome to push back against your editor.
Mm,
It's your work. Like I always say that. It's your thing at the end of the day. So, I welcome my clients pushing back against me, you know. Um, I now handle criticism well. Um, but I will say, like, in all fairness, like 8 years doing creative writing specifically in higher education does that to you because creative writing in higher education is very much like sitting in a room, having someone rip apart your work and sitting there taking it. And that's kind of what you develop is like a thick skin and the ability to do that.
mm,
Some people can be brutal. And actually, as someone who was like lectured in creative writing at universities and taught it, one of the things that I always talk about with the class, if we're going to share work, is the ability to give feedback and how important it is to learn to give feedback before you give it. Some people are criticism happy and relish the opportunity to be brutally honest because they rarely get that chance in real life. So when someone says to them, tell me what you really think, they forget to balance their feedback properly and they jump in with, well, I didn't like that and I don't like this and yada yada yada, which is just awful to hear as a writer. It's the kind of thing that stops people writing altogether.
Mm.
So you got to learn to give feedback first of all, and because of that, it's important to make sure you are asking the right people for feedback.
Mm.
Because if you're asking someone for feedback and they don't read, that's not like a hobby of theirs, or they maybe only read crime, but you've written epic fantasy, maybe they're not the right person for your work. You know what I mean? It's like there's so many elements that go into it.
Mm.
Um, so I've spent a lot of time sitting um, like behind a desk, trying not to cry. There was absolutely a few moments while I was doing my BA, MA, and PhD where I did cry at some of the feedback. Um, but it's made me much stronger. And part of that is the ability to separate yourself from your work. And that is key because you are not your work. You are not the novel you have written. As much as you might have put your heart and soul into it, and I totally get that, and people do, you aren't actually that work. You are your own person. You're separate from that. And
Yeah.
when people are giving feedback, they're not giving feedback about you as a human. They're giving feedback about your words. Um, and peer review is one of the most valuable tools we have as writers. Um, also, to say though that it is a subjective art.
Mm.
So, yes, there are writing rules, and yeah, all of that's true. I mean, once you've published in whatever kind of format you've done that, you're going to get readers who don't enjoy it. Of course, you are, because we can't all have the same book that is our favorite thing in the world. That wouldn't make sense. One of my reviews just said, not for me. And, it was a DNF, did not finish. Um, no star rating, and I appreciate that because if it's not for you and you didn't finish it, that's absolutely fine. You know, and my work will not be for everybody, your work won't be for everybody, and we both have different favorite books. That's just life.
Yeah. And I think as well in feedback, it's important, I for me, and I think for you as well as an editor, that you're giving feedback on what's working as well as what needs to be improved on, because that's what made receiving feedback for me so difficult when I shared that Game of Thrones-esque book and then they just ripped into it and was like, here's everything that's terrible. And I thought,
Mm.
was anything good? Did I do anything right at all? Because I don't know to keep doing it if I'm not told. I'm just going to assume that all of it's garbage. Um,
Yeah.
so knowing when you are doing something right is also important, so you know to keep doing it.
Yeah, totally. And that's like how I think in an ideal world, all writers would leave like a feedback session feeling like enthused,
Mm.
you know, which is why it's super important to think about who you're asking and who's giving you feedback. And the same is true for like beta readers, like they're your ideal reader. They're not just someone who will read your novel because they have the time or they're your friend. Um, you're trying to find your ideal reader, the person who would go into a bookshop, see your book and go, this sounds brilliant. That's for me.
Mm.
Um, yeah, awesome. Well, that was a lovely chat.
Yes. If you have any follow-up questions or anything that you would like to add or answer for yourself, feel free to drop it in the comments.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah,
We would love to hear more from everybody.
and we'll see you in our next video.
Yes. Bye. Like and subscribe.